Do you have a... Let us quickly check the sound. Are you ready to check the sound? So we have to get sound.
1 minute, please. And now.
Yeah, let's check it now with the sound. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan for our assistant right here, a big eye.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Lola Mueller from the German Environment Ministry. Sorry?
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for also being here. Yeah.
Where are you from? Oh, nice.
Okay, and I will sit down here and I will show you the public from time.
All right, we're ready to start. Thank you so much. I see that people walking in. Welcome, welcome. All right. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good afternoon. Welcome to this exciting session on the Green Jobs for Youth Pact and how together we can collaborate for a just transition. My name is Vicky Aridi, Program Manager, Youth Economic Opportunities, YEO 2030, and Generation Unlimited Young People's Action Team member. I want us all for a moment to reflect and be in silence for the children and young people across the globe who are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. A crisis they did not contribute to, but continue to bear the brunt of. If nothing is done from this COP, by 2030, 80 million jobs will be lost. 80 million, imagine that. What does that mean for my generation? We're already 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults. Many of you in the room who are young at heart as well. Yet amid this reality, young people continue to innovate, be resilient, with the force to youth green economic opportunities, to take action, and really to be at the forefront of the just transition. Some of these examples are like Motobricks, working on renewable energy in Kenya, soy gel, fertilizer from sugarcane waste, and YEO 2030 Green Jobs Action Team collaborating around resources on the topic. ILO, UNICEF's Generation Unlimited, and UNEP, working with and for young people, bring forth a very bold and unique partnership, the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, an interagency, multi-sectoral, and inclusive initiative that aims to close the skills gap of young people in developing countries, target the most climate vulnerable sectors, and really contribute to systemic change, accelerating the impact for people, planet, and prosperity. Imagine that. And the big picture of this pact is really how can we create 1 million green jobs, regreening of another 1 million existing jobs, and support young entrepreneurs. If this does not make you join the pact, I hope this session will. So today we have multi-stakeholders from diverse backgrounds who will share with us how we can join forces, embrace public-private youth partnerships, and together meaningfully contribute towards a just transition. I look around the room. Look to your neighbor on the right. Look to the neighbor on your left. Looking at the neighbors on your right and left, so much of experience, so much of resources lie there for the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. And today is the day we hope to catapult that forward towards a just transition. Without further ado, we have an exciting program ahead, and as you can see, my speakers are very punctual, so let's get started. All right, we have a video, so before we get to the session, all right. A round of applause for that video, please. All right, without further ado, we'll get started and hear from the three agencies who have come together for this pact, starting with Mr. Vic Van Vuren, Officer in Charge, Assistant Director General Jobs and Protection at the ILO. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, I'm thinking of what are my credentials to be sitting up here talking about youth when I'm on the tail end of my career. Well, my credentials are I've got 4 sons, I have an adopted daughter of 13 years old, and I've got 6 grandchildren. So I've got a vested interest in the Global Action for Youth program. And I think we need to reflect very seriously on this topic that we're going to be talking about today. One of my concerns about the COP events, and I've been to a few, is that it could become elitist and that only those who can afford it can get here. And we're missing out on youth, on marginalized groups, on civil society. It's becoming a huge challenge. And we need to make sure that the debates that we have here are taken to the masses out there and the scalability. And we look to the youth, to the organizations concerned, as to how we can take this beyond a room of talking about these issues today. But it gives me a great privilege to talk about the Global Action for Youth Pact of the 3 agencies which are represented here today. What we have at the moment is 1.2 billion young people around the world. And climate action is not only about securing the planet, but also that which is livable and also jobs and livelihoods for the future. The ILO data shows that the investments in the green economy, including clean and renewable energy, construction, sustainable agriculture, will create 8.4 million jobs for youth by 2030. That's the potential, and that's what we've got to achieve. A just transition is about leaving no one behind. Therefore, the ILO and the UNEP and the UNICEF's Generation Unlimited are joining forces on this Green Jobs for Youth Pact, an initiative for and with the youth. And the with the youth is an important component. It's not just telling them what to do, they will be included in this discussion. We want to create 1 million new green jobs with existing employers, focusing on young women. We want to assist in greening of 1 million existing jobs through skilling, reskilling and upskilling, as well as the greening of businesses themselves. And lastly, we want to support 10,000 young green entrepreneurs, starting sustainable businesses that will create more and better jobs. There's 3 E's that we're looking at. Employment creation and entrepreneurship is one component. Environmental education is a second one. And thirdly, the empowerment and youth engagement, where we will ensure that young people are at the core of the pact for the Youth Advisory Group, which will include youth organizations as well as young representatives from workers and employers. What we do need is the energy of the youth, the thinking of the future, but also there's a responsibility not only on our organizations to create the space, But there's a need for the youth to take ownership of their careers. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a joint initiative that will create these opportunities in the future, and we've got great hope for the future. At the moment, there's a lot of turmoil in the world, and many leaders are letting us down in not allowing us to create that space. But we need to champion this, and we've got the champions in the room, and I look forward to taking this further. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Van Buren. Indeed, inclusivity, young people at the front, and their champions in the room. Over to you, Ms. Susan Gardner, Director of Ecosystems Division at UNEP, for your remarks.
Thanks, Vicki. It's a pleasure, but I'm not sure if this mic is working. How's that? Is that working? Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the conversation and seeing where we take it from here. A chief moral obligation of the 21st century is to build a green economy that's strong enough to lift people out of poverty while creating this just transition that we just heard Vic talking about to a world that lives in harmony with nature. And young leaders, entrepreneurs, scientists of the future, thought leaders of today, they have the potential to forge ahead from last century's economy that was pollution-based, that linear economy that was extraction-based, to a new vision of a nature-positive circular economy. And this new Green Jobs for Youth Pact is such an exciting thing that I'm just very pleased to see the progress we're making here, enhancing young action for the planet, ensuring that by all of us working together, we tackle the triple planetary crisis of nature, loss, pollution, and climate together. We know that we need to cut global 5% this decade, and that there's no time to waste. And we know we can't solve problems just by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them and got us to this place. Addressing the triple planetary crisis requires a different approach. Big, bold, brave ideas. And let's not forget about those 100 million jobs that can be created in the coming decades through this kind of action. Now, at the same time, as Vicki mentioned, there could also be 80 million jobs that will go away. But they can go away in a way where they're transitioned to a green and circular economy, where we see a lot of investment in reskilling the workforce to ensure that no one's left behind. So these are jobs of the future for everyone. And ensuring that that can be anything from catering to engineering, from conservation to industrial design. Everyone can be part of this movement. Every job has the potential to be a green job. For example, one of the recent things we've seen is with sustainable fashion. And it's still sort of a niche skill, but globally, this was one of the fastest growing green skills since 2016 to 2020, with an average growth rate of about 90%. The new trend just demonstrates how you can take an industry that's been around for thousands of years and actually make a shift to green. And LinkedIn has indicated that the share of green talent in the global workforce has increased from about a little over 9% in 2015 to about 13% last year. But I would argue that we can get to 100% by 2030, and that should be the vision that we have. We need to ask ourselves, are we equipping our youth with the education and skills that they need today to be able to address these environmental challenges tomorrow? And the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, through this, UNEP, together with key stakeholders in youth, we're so excited to equip youth from the most marginalized and climate vulnerable communities with green, employable, entrepreneurial skills while retaining the existing workforce to transition to greener jobs. We already work closely with educational partners through major universities and networks and youth organizations and movements to begin to provide tools to prepare youth for the jobs and the skills they're going to need in the future and make this transition to low carbon, circular, and nature positive economy. So we very much look forward to working together with our partners, with national governments, ILO, UNICEF-GenU, and their networks, and joining the dots between all of the different practitioners to empower new action. This really does have to be the decade of action. We need to be all hands on deck working together. If we can make this happen, making peace with nature is truly the defining task of the 21st century, and we need to ensure that young people are at the heart of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Indeed, young people at the heart of it. Every job has the potential to be a green job. Thank you so much. And now over to you, Mr. Kevin Frey, CEO of UNICEF's Generation Unlimited, for your remarks.
Great. Thanks, Vicky. I'm really excited to be here today with our partners from ILO and UNEP to launch this Green Jobs for Youth Pact. As everybody at COP knows, we're facing a planetary crisis. But young people are also facing another crisis, an unemployment crisis, an underemployment crisis. And as we know, with many crises, they do create opportunities. And the combination of these two crises are creating opportunities for people. Opportunities to deliver a triple dividend, a dividend of reducing inequality, of addressing climate change, and of ensuring that young people have dignified livelihoods. But if we look at the trajectory that we're on, in fact, not only will we not achieve the triple dividend, we're on a path to achieve the exact opposite. The planetary crisis is continuing to worsen. The benefits of this transition to a net zero economy are accruing to the wealthiest nations and the citizens of those wealthy nations. And youth unemployment, which is already at a historic high, will worsen because of the elimination of jobs in the quote-unquote brown economy. So to recognize that triple dividend, we have to ensure that young people are powering the transition to a net zero world as innovators, as employees, as entrepreneurs, and as social change agents. The good news is they're ready. They're motivated. I was in Rwanda a month ago at the Youth Connect Summit. I spent a week with 4,000 young people. And I thought, given all the crises that are swirling and that they're facing, I would spend the week talking about the problems. Quite often, we spend a lot of time admiring the problems. But these young people are not interested in talking about the problems or the barriers. They're looking for opportunities to drive the green transition forward as entrepreneurs, as employees, and as social change agents. But the reality is, for most young people today, they don't have access to opportunities in the green economy. And when they do, they don't have the skills that they need to be able to participate. As we heard from Vic, the world has 1.2 billion young people aged 15 to 24. And if they do not have the green skills that are demanded by these new economies, they will be left out and they will be left behind. As jobs are eliminated in these brown economies and as new jobs are created in green and blue economies. The ILO predicts that the green transition will see the elimination globally of 71 million jobs, but also the creation of 78 million new jobs. But to participate in those new jobs, young people need green skills. And there's no question that the world cannot and will not achieve a just transition if young people cannot fill those tens of millions of jobs that will be emerging in the green economy, in sectors like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and waste management. But anytime you're talking about jobs, you're talking about entrepreneurship, you're talking about financing, you need the private sector at the table. And that's why we need this pact to come to life as a public-private youth partnership. And that's what Generation Unlimited does every day, brings the private sector together with the public sector and young people to tackle these problems. We had a great event earlier this week with LinkedIn, who's really leading the way on green skills and is behind this pact as we push forward. And there'll be a video a little bit later in this presentation from Bob Moritz. He's the global chairman of PwC, who again is absolutely motivated and driving the mission of this pact forward on making sure young people have green skills and connections to opportunities in the green economy. Tomorrow, with PwC, UNICEF-GenU Unlimited will launch a report entitled The Net Zero Generation: Why the World Needs to Upskill Young People. And that report is going to make the case that the triple dividend we talked about, reducing inequality, addressing the planetary crisis, and delivering dignified jobs for young people can only be done if young people have access to green skills and green jobs. And while governments, private sector, multilaterals are absolutely key to driving this pact forward, let's be honest, young people have to be at the center. I was talking to somebody called Calvin Shikuku just an hour and a half ago. He wanted to be here. He's actually presenting probably in the room right behind us. He won the Imagine Ventures social entrepreneurship competition. He's a young man from Kenya 2 years ago. He went around his community in an informal settlement in Kenya, collecting organic waste and turning them into small briquettes to power the energy needs of these young houses there. He had one employee when he started 2 years ago. He now has 50 employees in this informal settlement in Kenya. So Calvin is delivering that triple dividend. 50 jobs for young people, a more sustainable planet with clean energy, and he's creating real wealth and driving the economy forward. So to conclude, the road to net zero can either create a more just world for young people, or we can leave them even further behind. We have a small window, as we've all heard, to act, but we need to deliver the results this pact is about, the private sector to come together with public sector and youth to make sure that the green transition to a net zero world is powered by young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Indeed, to address the triple dividend, young people must be at the core. Thank you so much for taking your time. We'd like you to invite you to have your seats. Thank you. All right. So we have just heard from the three agencies who are leading the pact. Now we're going to hear from the different stakeholders who are passionate about green jobs, reskilling, and the just transition. So I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Lola Muller, Policy Officer, Division United Nations 2030 Agenda, Developing Countries and Emerging Economies for BMUV in Germany. Mr. Abdullah, Director, Environmental Policy and Planning, Environment Agency, Abu Dhabi, UAE. Amadou Sako, Advisor and Project Officer for Africa and Youth International Organization of Employers. Mr. Ludovic Boet, Confederal Secretary, European Trade Union Confederation. And Mr. Vladislav Kaim, Focal Point Green Jobs Working Group Youngo. All right, you're all on stage, and thank you for joining us here today. And we have an exciting discussion ahead. And reading your titles, they were quite engaging. So we'll get started with Vlad, of course, because we're talking about the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. And really, why is the decent work agenda so important to young people?
First and foremost, I would like to start with huge thanks to all the partners that made the pact happen. It's been an honor for our working group and for Youngo to be direct contributors to it on an equal footing. And I think that here and now we are laying a way for a new and transformational way of partnership between youth and social dialogue partners when it comes to creation of green jobs for youth. Green jobs has been a rising matter of agenda for youth engaged in climate work because, as it has been mentioned by my colleague before, after the pandemic, we as a generation emerged with three anxieties that were overlapping a lot. anxiety about our health post-COVID, anxiety about the climate crisis, and anxiety about our economic future. And despite seeming so sometimes not related to one another, they are in fact very interrelated. They represent, and we have seen this reflected in the Global Youth Statement that was adopted by the 17th Conference of Youth, that the creation of green jobs for youth, especially in the context of the decade that we are in and the decade after that, represents a crucial down payment into the future of the planet and into the future of our generation. We are looking into strategies of decarbonization, phasing down fossil fuels, lowering emissions. We see a lot of numbers there, but beyond those numbers, there are people. We need people who would be able to drive all those industries, who need to bring their emissions down forward. We cannot transform numbers into reality if there is not enough talent in the pipeline to do that. And that is why creation of the green jobs for youth today and for the future generations, it is one of the key aspects of making sure that our decarbonization targets actually take shape. The future of green transition depends on present of green skills. And this is why in the Global Youth Statement, we have been focusing on green jobs in a chapter that is called Reimagining and Transforming Economies. Because our pact should be seen as first and foremost one of the first stepping stones into a much more scalable transformation of the economic structure that we all would be undergoing during the green transition. And for our generation, wherever we live, it is absolutely vital to make sure that we get this transition right. Because the cost of mistakes on this path are not only 80 million jobs that are not going to be created, as Vicky mentioned, but it is also an entire generation who would feel socially, planetary, climatically insecure like we haven't seen in many generations before. And we represent a generation with a fantastic potential, and not only that, but also with a fantastic present. We are already here. We are experts. We are aspiring young professionals, and we are ready to contribute. And that is why starting this pact here and now today, it is so crucial to continuing this work, to making sure that we create the future of the green jobs for youth together with the youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Indeed, in order to create green jobs and to be a step closer to decarbonization, it is very key to look at these key issues you've raised. And now over to you, Lola. You work on the 2030 agenda and with developing countries. And could you share a bit about what Germany is doing on decarbonization and job creation with partners all across the globe?
Yes, very happy to do so. So thank you so much for this opportunity. In name of the German Federal Ministry for Environment, we're very happy that this important pact is being launched today. Before I go into speaking what Germany does, because it's very interesting to talk about what we do, but I would also just want to highlight the importance of this initiative and how it fits also very well to what we're doing at current state and play, both nationally but also mostly internationally. So I want to focus quickly on where we are sitting today. According to the IPCC report and the UNEP gap report, which came out recently right before COP27, we will not be able to achieve our 1.5 degree goal, according to the current state of play. There are shortages in the labor sector, which translate in considerable delays in project implementation in the energy sector. That has been highlighted also by reports of the ILO. So we see an incredible lag in the implementation of these goals. We are working on the negotiating part of things with view to the mitigation working plan, for instance, and next year there will be a global stock take which will take place. However, we need to really look into how do we achieve these goals with view to implementation. And there it's really important that we act fast, also in view of huge disasters that have taken place all around the world. I would like to focus a bit on Pakistan with the floodings that have taken place and the extreme weather events. It's important that we focus on those sectors, jobs swiftly, that create growth swiftly, but also at the same time are crucial for the transition to a green economy. So very happy that also within this pact we're looking on high impact sectors such as manufacturing, construction and agriculture. For a transition to happen to transition to a green economy, it's also important that we transition the labor market. So both those people that are working already in so-called brown sectors, that they manage to be reskilled in such a way that they can be employed in other sectors again, but also most notably, and that's why we're also here today, and I'm speaking also in name of the group of young people, that we have fora and also implementation modalities that help us breach this gap, skill us in such a way that we are able to enter the sector appropriately. We've seen already some transition happening, most notably in the energy sector. There have been historic shifts. The energy, we see that about 50% of total workers today work in this sector, but there's still much more to do. We need to really walk this talk, and we see that there's a business case also to be made. So as the WEF also highlights, investing in solar PV creates 1.5 times more jobs as fossil fuel sectors. Also, even more in the building efficiency sector, 2.8 times. If we invest in the building sector, building efficiency sector, 2.8 times more jobs can be created in the fossil fuel sector. So there is a business case. The policy is hopefully going in the right direction. The market needs to adapt to these policy shifts, but we're lagging behind. So therefore, and this comes now to what we are doing as Germany, we're very, very happy about the Green Jobs for Youth Pact. It's an incredible achievement. We're very happy that the UN agencies are coming together today to launch this together. We, as Germany, have been very involved in different initiatives. I was focal point for Stockholm Plus 50, which has taken place in February in Stockholm. And we organize, or we're co-leading the leadership dialogue on achieving a sustainable and inclusive recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, where most notably the focus was also on the high impact sectors. This initiative here is kind of like a legacy initiative out of Stockholm Plus 50, because Stockholm Plus 50 focused so much on youth and the importance of stakeholders to be included for this transition to take place. Furthermore, Germany is committed to the pact by contributing through our initiative Go for SDGs. Go for SDGs is well networked throughout all initiatives in the UN sector, not all of course, but a considerable bunch. And we build very much our work on international partnerships such as GGKP, the International Resource Panel, the One Planet Network, and the Partnership for Action on Green Economy. My former boss is kind of like a founder of PAGE. So all this to say, Germany stands behind the Green Youth Pact. We're very delighted that it has been launched today, and happy to hear to the contributions of the next speaker. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Lola. Indeed, there's a need to transition the labor markets, and Germany is already leading by example with what they're doing with the pact and other work around this topic. And now over to you, Mr. Abdullah. UAE is really at the forefront of their efforts on decarbonization, and you have a new youth employment strategy. Could you be able to share a bit more about it and share bits on the green aspects of that strategy?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's good to hear from our colleagues and here. I'm actually excited to participate in this session. However, you know, and as you've mentioned, I think what we do on UAE, basically we have a youth minister, and she's one of the youngest lady. I hope you can visit our pavilion. She was there. So we, as a country, we believe in youth, and what we did basically, we start actually look into different aspect of youth to develop their green skills. And what I mean by green skills here is not to focus on age, but we start from sustainable schools. So we have a program called Sustainable Schools, where we make sure that the modules are on the schools are available for the students since starting from KG. And then we focus as well on a different level where we do a partnership with, we count in the private sectors, academia, government, where they have to put in efforts. And we have launched a new program called Youth Delegates Program. As you know, we will be hosting COP, next COP inshallah, in the Emirates COP. And this is something that will be good for this, for the climate and the green jobs as well. I would like also to highlight that the most important thing that, and the core, we have to motivate, empower the youth, but everything needs to be planned for them. Youth are more faster than us or the previous. They don't like to have and discuss problems. They are looking for solutions. As mentioned by Kevin in the previous session, he did mention this. So they are proactive, ready to take action. What they need is just a little directions, some guidance, just to put them in the right place. And this is what we are trying to do. Even our leadership are focusing on youth. By the way, I remember on COP26 and COP25 and 6, our delegates, 80% of them are youth. And now, even though our new program focusing on and making sure that the youth are participating in different levels, negotiation levels, when it comes to UN, the COP negotiation, as well to make sure they are participating and their voice are here and can be heard by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Indeed, youth are solution-oriented, and UAE is walking the talk through sustainable schools and the Youth Climate Delegates Program. And to you, Amadou, when we talk about the green transition, we can't leave the private sector and greening of SMEs. So can you share some examples how businesses are really supporting the greening of SMEs across the continent of Africa?
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here today. I would like to congratulate the organizer of this event on this very important topic. And I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Eric Oschler, ILO Director for North Africa, and of my colleagues of IOE, Mrs. Bushra and Robert, and thanks to all of you. So from the very outset, it is important to mention that for creating more jobs, including green jobs, it is mandatory to create an enabling business environment. So to create an environment where the private sector can not only grow, but also thrive and innovate. So in this forward-thinking scenario, companies are able to expand their investment in better technology and in upskilling and reskilling to produce better goods and service and attract great talent. In doing so, they will become more predictive, sustainable, innovative, competitive, create more and better employment and opportunities, including green jobs. It is extremely important to keep this in mind. Before joining the IOE, I was myself an entrepreneur, a small SME owner, a job creator. And if there is one thing that I can tell you, it is very complicated to think about sustainability, to think about everything that is related to green, when your main concern is just surviving. So please, let's keep that in mind. An enabling environment for businesses, first thing. So at the IOE, when it comes to the IOE, so from the ILO level, the International Labour Organization, to the national level with our members, we've been advocating and supporting greening enterprises of all sizes, including SMEs. So first of all, the IOE, the International Organization of Employers, the IOE has been instrumental in the drafting and adoption of the International Labour Organization reference document, Guideline for a Just Transition toward Environmentally Sustainable Economies and Societies for All, and ensured economic and business priorities were adequately acknowledged. Also, the IOE has launched the Employers Alliance for Green Skills to facilitate the exchange of experience, establish partnerships, and build capacity of members in the context of green skills mapping, anticipation, and frameworks to ensure labor market disruption stay at a minimum. Furthermore, we are actively involved in the Climate Action for Jobs initiative of the International Labour Organization, and we are now joining the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, which we feel is promising and will be exciting to bring our global members to work in these initiatives. So some of our members are very active in the green agenda. For example, the Federation of Egyptian Industry have launched several initiatives at COP27 this year. Business United South Africa is involved in the Just Energy Transition Partnership with the European Union, and many of our members work together on topics like the Danish industry is working with several regional partners, with Moroccan employers organizations. So really all our members are actively involved in the green and the just transition debate. And at our level, at the global level, we really make sure that they are well aware of the challenges that are related to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, an enabling environment is critical, and they are walking the talk. And to you, Mr. Ludovic, how are labor unions engaging the young members, and what are some of the challenges they usually face to find decent work?
Yeah, so yes, thanks for the debate. I think it's really important that the debate and the contributions that were done about the fact we need a just transition, that it's about decent work. It's about having an agenda of decent work. It's about having an agenda of quality jobs. It's about social rights. It's about social protection. It's about reskilling. It's about labor rights. It's about social dialogue. It's a vision. It's a transformative vision for society that should go to decarbonation. This is important because we need to put content to just transition. This discussion is really important. I share the optimism of the opportunities, but I see also the difficulties in which young people are for the moment. If we look at the global figures, if we look at the situation of young people, it's a lot of precarious jobs, it's a lot of difficulties to pay their bills, it's a lot of informal work, a lot of unemployment, a lot of them under the minimum wage when they exist, having difficulties or even having a lot of precarious contracts and with no certainty in the future of what will be their future. But a lot of optimism and willingness from themselves to be engaged in the solutions. So this means that we should also be concrete about what the green transition should be. So if it's just transition, it means also that we need to be concrete on how the industries will change, how this will create jobs, etc. And that we do not take only the global figures. Global figures might show that there will be job creation, that there will be more job creation than job destruction. But when we look in specific regions affected by climate change or who will have to decarbonize, some of these regions face the situation of maybe losing a lot of jobs. And we cannot sell that the transition will mean that people will have to migrate. If I look at only in Europe, 25, not due to the transition, but due to globalization, already 25% of the population of Bulgaria left the country. If the green transition means that industries close in Bulgaria and that all young people continue to go to other countries, and that it means desertification of these regions. Same thing apply for Poland if we close the coal mines, which we have to do, but they need to have solutions in their regions with investments, with quality jobs, and often the problem is that the jobs that are created do not have the same type of protection that jobs that are destructed. If I'm speaking about industry, we often have well-paid workers, we often have good health and safety measures, etc., and also good quality jobs. When we speak about green jobs, we have to make sure that all these jobs created are quality jobs, that they will be well-paid, that they will bring perspective to workers.
Thank you so much. Indeed, you've highlighted what young people go through: unemployment, payments below the minimum wages, which is so critical. And we're winding up this panel as we have another panel, but just to invite each speaker, I know we have 1 or 2 minutes left, so if you could say one word, and I just mean one word, about what you hope to see from the pact in one word.
I'm sorry, but I can do it only in 3. Sorry, 4. Green and decent jobs for youth.
All right, over to you, Amadou, and then Lola. Okay.
Implementation.
Implementation. Amadou?
Skills development, right skilling.
Skills development. Over to you.
Well, I think transformation.
All right.
Well, for me, it will be a question. Do we have a skills gap, or do we have gap of quality jobs?
All right, so we've had implementation, we've had green skills and decent work. Do we have a skills gap? Transformation, implementation. And those are the words that indeed the pact will achieve if we can collaborate after this event. So thank you so much to my wonderful panelists. A round of applause, please. All right, I'll invite you to have your seats as we welcome the next panel. I know there's a lot of information. I hope you're still with us. By a show of hands, how many are still with us? Woo! Yes. And as I invite our panelists to join, there will be a video that will be shown by the chairman of PwC, Robert Morbitz. He wasn't able to be with us here today, but he was gracious enough to share a message. So before I invite the panel, we'll have the video first. All right. I think the sound is coming up. Just give us 1 or 2 minutes. And maybe as we wait for the sound to come up.
Hi, it's Bob Moritz.
All right,
I'm sorry I can't be with you here today, but thanks very much for the invitation to address you. As we all know, the concept of upskilling or reskilling is top of mind and hugely important to the future of the world and to the future of the citizens of the world. And Kevin is going to describe for you the report that we've worked together with UNICEF and GenU to bring this to life. There's 3 important themes that came to my attention in going through this analysis. First, the issue is real. The reality is when we talk to our clients, we see a tremendous gap in the skills that people need and the opportunity to fill those gaps in terms of actually balancing out the labor shortage. These things are real not only for the world, but also for organizations like PwC. We ourselves are skilling up thousands and hundreds of thousands of our people. And in fact, just this past year, we upskilled 100,000 of our people in the area of ESG specifically, so they are more fit for the future. Second, this is not business as usual. The reality is this is not just accelerating what we've been talking about in the past. This is fundamentally different in terms of the rewiring to make it beneficial for all. If you think about the skills gap, climate change and all the issues associated with it hit particular industries most pointedly. These are primarily male-dominated type businesses. And as a result, the rewiring has to work in the concept of gender as well, as we think about the inequities that exist in the majority parity game. And third, most importantly, clearly, is this has to work for the youth. The reality is this is about setting up the stage for our people tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow, and to allow them to not only participate and benefit, but equally as important, drive and own the entrepreneurship that is needed. There's a big opportunity to engage them, to leverage them, and to ensure that they benefit from this in a big time way. So thanks again for everybody for both the dialogue today and the many contributions. Thanks again to the GenU and UNICEF organization, and look forward to hearing the report out from your discussions today.
Thank you, Robert Moritz. Indeed, it's not business as usual. Young people need skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. Thank you so much. A round of applause for him in absentia. All right, we're moving to our final panel of this event, and really we'll see how we can collaborate for public-private youth partnerships. And I'd like to invite with me on stage Ms. Nicole Makowski, Coordinator, International Affairs, Sustainable Development and Innovation from Argentina, Mr. Nick Bridge, the Foreign Secretary Special Representative for Climate Change in United Kingdom, Mr. Gonzalo Mera, Director of Climate Change at the Chairman's Office of Iberdrola, Mr. Karthikeya Sarabhi, Director, Center for Environment Education of India, and Ms. Amal Ridene, climate activist and Generation Unlimited Young People's Action Team member. A round of applause for this panel. All right, welcome. And Amal, starting with you as the youngest member of this panel, how do you think young people and multi-stakeholders can collaborate around youth employment? And what are some of those best practices you can share from what you've seen?
Thank you, Vicky. Hi, everyone. Pleased to be here with you all today. Indeed, I am one of the Generation Unlimited YPAD members, and I'm joining COP27 as one of the Tunisian young climate change negotiators. And here I'm already highlighting one particular aspect where young people can be already joining or echoing their voices as part of official negotiations, not only as a separate entities of young people. It is important, I believe, to make sure that we assess the needs, and not only the needs in terms of coming up with new pledges, but also it's important to make sure that we go back to basics. We have been talking about bridging the gaps, we have been talking about important inclusion of young people, but as my colleague in the previous panel already mentioned, it is important that we are making sure that we have basic quality education, access to resources before getting towards this. It is also important, I believe, that we make sure that we come up with relevant reforms to manage the ongoing needs of today, the ongoing reality, but also the generational ways. Young people are really willing to engage and to take the lead, but it is also important to make sure that we understand how things actually work. We will be able to bridge and bring our own spirit, our own ways of doing things, but sometimes the existing rules can be frustrating. And I'm probably talking about my own experience. If I'm willing to engage here in the UNFCCC negotiations, it is important to know what are the actual rules, and then I will be willing to push forward my country's position, for example, to aim for better ways and better engagement. I also believe that every single stakeholder should acknowledge that there is something in there for them in this conversation. It's no longer the type of things where you would be mentioning in your impact report or checking the boxes to just showcase that you're doing something great, but I believe that it is a conversation for all of us and a call to action to all the stakeholders. So as we are saying it, and I think for us in GenU, this is what we have been advocating for. The public-private youth partnership is really crucial today, and we are talking about continents where the outlook of younger generations for the upcoming years is the biggest. So it is an important potential, and we do really need to join forces when it comes to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amal. Indeed, every stakeholder has a piece to play, and young people need to understand the context and get that knowledge by collaboration. And to you, Ms. Nicole, Argentina is doing some fantastic work with young people. And what are you doing to promote especially green job opportunities for youth in Argentina?
Thanks, Vicky. And let me thank also ILO, UNEP, and UNICEF for having me here today, and to all of you for coming here and, well, to hear about youth and green jobs. Yeah. Okay. There. Which I hope are key priorities for everyone. So Argentina is working on the challenge of building a sustainable and comprehensive development model that leaves no one behind. We are building this model through several programs, actions, and policies that have now been implemented over time and that reflect our international commitments, but also active participants in initiatives such as Partnership for Action on Green Economy, PAGE, and Climate Action for Jobs. So one example is our National Cabinet on Climate Change, which we launched a few years ago with a stakeholder approach. And it is a governance mechanism that brings together different areas of government at the national and subnational levels, as well as civil society actors. This cabinet has an external advisory council, which channels the perspective, recommendations, and proposals of representatives of the scientific community, environmental organizations, universities, unions, business entities, political parties, and indigenous communities. So as you can see, it's a lot. And also within the cabinet, we have a just labor transition working group that provides a guide to climate actions through a people-centered, low-carbon, and resilient approach. Some of its lines of work include, for example, the adaptation of productive systems and their impacts on both formal and informal employment, the training and acquisition of skills of new jobs, the development of macroeconomic, industrial, and sectoral policies that enable green job growth, and finally, actions that contribute to a circular, social, and popular economy. Before going further into some of our other national plans and strategies, I would also like to highlight that recently the 10YFP, which is the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, which depends on UNEP. You can check them out, their work online. They recently published a global strategy for sustainable consumption and production for SCP 2023-2030. What is interesting is that in its operationalization principles, it reads that mainstreaming meaningful engagement of youth and their representation in the implementation of this strategy, as well as across the areas of the work of the One Planet Network, is key. Children and youth, together with other vulnerable groups, especially those on the front lines, are facing impacts of environmental crisis with limited space to engage in decision-making processes. Another thing we have got going on is that last year we also published our National Sustainable Consumption and Production Strategy, whose objective is to promote the decoupling of economic growth from environmental degradation and the intensive use of resources in the framework of a just transition process. And I would also like to talk about how the pact, what a country like Argentina, would want from the pact, or how the pact can leverage existing work. So we are well aware that informality is a historical problem both in Argentina and Latin America as a whole. And according to ILO, in our region there are at least 140 million people working in these conditions, so 140 million people. This represents more than half of all the workforce. It is a problem that we are working to solve and to which possible responses can and must involve a sustainable approach. But we are also working on different initiatives to strengthen the role of informal workers who are part of the recycling chain, and also on programs to improve skills and labor insertion of the most vulnerable groups. These programs would not only contribute to the training of workers, but also to stimulate the public and private sectors, providing tax benefits to companies that create green jobs, and strengthening the capacities of government officials who design and implement labor policies. Working side by side with companies is key, not only to promote quality jobs, but also to build a sustainable economy with an inclusive approach. Finally, I wanted to highlight an ECLAC, which is the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean study, which is called Green Jobs in Argentina, Opportunities to Advance the Environmental and Social Agenda. And I think it is also interesting that it only mentions young people when stating that those under 25 years of age perform 11% of green jobs, and that the youth constitute 13% of total registered salaried employment. Youth also has a very important participation in the agricultural, construction, and tourism sectors. So what this data implies within the framework of this initiative is that we have to improve the green employment rates for young people in Argentina. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing how Argentina is using policies, partnerships, action plans, and also looking at the informal sectors as well. And to Mr. Nick, congratulations on the launch of UK's new sustainability strategy. And what is UK doing around green jobs and skills, especially for young people?
Thank you very much. And if I may, I'll also give an international answer as well as what the UK is doing. But thank you very much. I'm delighted that my youth photo is on the screen from before COP26. And I've gone very grey since then. I've joined Gonzalo and Cartigueya now after the stress of COP26. But I can see that we're sticking with the old photo. It's good. Thank you so much. Two quick themes, if I may. I think one, jobs for youth, one, education, and obviously they're completely interrelated, but I'll do it that way. On jobs, you know, the big picture point I want to start with is net zero. You know, it's really important to remember that obviously, you know, net zero means nothing without implementation, without policies, and we are sadly still lacking a lot of the specific policies and ambition that we need. But we have 90% of the world or more agreeing to a net zero transition and all that entails, having had almost nobody on that journey 2 or 3 years ago. And the reason I start there is because I know as an economist and as a diplomat and working in the UK on our Climate Change Act over the last 14 years, and the Act basically began the net zero journey for the UK, I know that then leads to looking at every sector of your economy, what the jobs that are needed, what the investments that are needed, and they have to be within this very, very constrained carbon budget. And so the top message on jobs and net zero is a very positive one, which is that the net zero transition, you know, means that the economy will look fundamentally different. Everywhere that our country has legislation and laws like we do and many other countries now do, it will have to happen. It may not be as quick as we like, it may be more challenging, but it's locked in that we will green our economies. And a lot of that story is a very positive job story. More jobs and greener jobs and more skilled green jobs. Just taking the energy sector in the UK, we had 40% of our energy from coal 8 years ago. A very, very small number of people were responsible for generating that coal power. We now have approaching in a few years 50 gigawatts of offshore wind and 0 coal in our power generation mix. And we'll hear from Iberdrola about that global story. But those offshore wind jobs are being created in all of our formerly depleted post-industrial zones across in Doncaster, in Hull, in Yorkshire, in Lancashire, up in Glasgow, across Scotland, precisely where we're trying to regenerate and bring back skills. We now have the world's leading offshore wind research centre in Blyth, where my family comes from in the northeast. We have the wind and tidal and marine world-class centres in Orkney and down in Cornwall. These are really high-skilled jobs, but there's a lot of them in every part of the country. And I know from working previously in the United States that there are jobs in every district, and you can say that around the world, when you do locally disintermediated power in that way. And so the general picture, I think, is that the net zero transition, we now have the responsibility to make it a young people's job-rich, highly skilled transition, and I think we have the scope to do that. So I think it's really important to join up the jobs conversation with that incredibly significant net zero pronouncement by the world that will very rapidly have to translate into real-world policies in every country in the world. Second, and related, on education, we've had this very long-standing and serious commitment as the UK as a development partner to secure 12 years of quality education for every girl and boy, and that a particular emphasis has been on the girls, obviously, but not just in a development sense, but in bringing climate, environment, biodiversity all together and reflecting in education. This is not published yet, but just to show you the draft headline of one of our next policy positions in the UK, addressing the climate, environment and biodiversity crisis through the lens of girls' education. So binding together these different agendas is very exciting. And we all, obviously, we know the statistics. We know that 40 million children's education is currently disrupted by climate impacts. Even just in the Horn of Africa, it's 3.5 million children have come out of education in the last few weeks and months. In Pakistan, 20,000 schools are closed because of the floods. So it's become a very, very immediate moment, and we need to take advantage of the political profile of these appalling climate impacts on children. And I just came from an event where the UK was very proud to launch with Germany a new phase of our disaster risk response, insurance response. So you have prepayments of insurance ready to go before anything happens. You're ready to go, and then within 14 days you've distributed these disaster risk payments. And the excitement about that event was it was the world's first payment system orientated towards children and women. Because if you measure the children that are impacted by climate events, you're getting into the community. It's not just for children, it's for their fathers and their brothers, and for the young people. But it's a specifically children-orientated disaster risk response because of the speed with which we're seeing these impacts hit children and young people. So on the education side, we need to work rapidly in the UK to blend our long-standing commitment to women and to girls' education with our emerging, rapidly ramping up commitment to climate finance, which has now become a very big share of our effort, doubled last year at COP to 11.6 billion, within which we've tripled the adaptation to balance adaptation and mitigation better. Within all of that, 90% or more is grants, not tied to some other commitment. So it's grants, it's given. And so I think that's where I'll stop, is just to say, jobs, we have to make the net zero transition young people and job rich, and I think it really is waiting to be done. We hear a lot about automation and about this and that. I think it's really rich as a young people's job skilled transition, and I just want to reinforce that I mentioned all the regions of the UK and the regions of all countries. It's not centered in particular centers, it's everywhere. And then secondly, the education, and that we're in a crisis right now around the world with young people being knocked out of education because of climate impacts that's only going to accelerate dramatically. So we need the instruments of the kind that I just described to try and challenge that challenge. Thank you, try and meet that challenge. So thank you to the organisers. I know how much effort it takes and to put this on, and how much has been built up since Stockholm and the ILO and the other events. So thank you to everybody who's working hard day by day to give us this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Indeed, to achieve the net zero transition, collaboration is key. Young people should be at the center. And also education, which is affected by the climate crisis, is also a tool for reskilling and upskilling. Thank you so much. And over to you, Mr. Gonzalo. We know you're very excited about this pact, and we'd like you to share a bit why, and also if you could just share, we know Iberdrola with decarbonization is quite at the forefront. How are you creating new jobs towards that, and especially with young people? So those.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicky. And as in the case of Nick, you can see that my picture is previous to the Glasgow COP, no? So we work in the energy sector, Iberdrola. So the energy transition is moving forward, but needs to move much faster. Society, especially young people and the most vulnerable people, are asking more action from governments, from firms, and from society. And moving faster is doable because we are seeing a revolution of clean technologies, not just renewables, but batteries, green hydrogen, heat pumps, and is a must. So, and at the same time, we are seeing an acceleration of climate and energy policies, not just for climate reasons, but also for energy security. So, in this context, my firm Iberdrola, we are taking more action. We are accelerating our decarbonization plans, and we have just presented new climate objectives, much more ambitious, and our strategic plan for the next 3 years to invest 47 billion euros just on renewables and clean solutions, 47 euros. So the plan is based on 4 pillars: 100% renewables, 100% smart grid, 100% green solution for our customers, and this is important, 100% green procurement from our value chain. And we want to do it with 2 values. We want to do it in a way that has a positive impact on nature, on biodiversity, not just climate, but nature, and a positive impact on society, especially employment. So we think this is a good plan for our shareholders, but we think it's a good plan for society because it accelerates the solutions to the several crises we are facing at the same time. We have the climate crisis, the energy crisis, the economic crisis, biodiversity crisis, and of course, employment crisis, especially for youth. Here I want to mention 3 things, 3 initiatives we are already doing. The first is that we have committed to hire 12,000 new employers over the next 3 years, especially young people, 12,000 new employers, new jobs, to create 12,000 new jobs. The second is that we are working in a very strong alliance with the European Roundtable of Industry, with big European industries at the EU level, to retain, to reskill, and retain and create 1,000 new jobs, 1,000 new green jobs, and before 2025, and So I say I say it's not 1,000, it's 1 million new green jobs by 2025 and 5 million new jobs for 2030. And the last initiative I want to mention is the project the alliance we have signed with UNICEF and in particular with GenU to take advantage of the job opportunities for vulnerable young people, in the energy and climate transition. So we have a very real alliance and very transformative alliances working in Somalia with entrepreneurships, working in Brazil, 1 million opportunities, and working in Spain with GenU to really in a transformative project, working with 7 NGOs, working with public administration to take advantage of these opportunities. But this is not enough. We need to do much more. So regarding the Green Job for Youth Plant, I have to say that is fully aligned with our vision and with our action. And here today, I want to announce that we will be extremely happy to join the pact, to work together with all of you, to achieve these objectives, to have a real impact, because in the end, this is what we are looking for, to have impact. So I think we are shaping the future, and the future belongs to youth. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for Iberdola for joining the pact. All right. One of our special guests has also arrived, and we'd like to acknowledge him, Dr. Mahmoud Mohideen, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for Egypt. A round of applause, please. And he'll be giving a few remarks before we continue with this panel. So I'd like to invite him to give a few remarks. We're very honored to have him. He's quite the hot commodity in the different rooms, so.
You are so kind. Thank you so much. Very happy and pleased to share some points of reflection to the importance of the topic on green jobs for Youth Pact, accelerating young skills and talent for green jobs. This is not the first accelerator that I come across during the last few months. One of them, of course, is the big accelerator supported by the UN system for achieving the SDGs, which require lots of funding and lots of great collaboration on technical assistance and good support as well of investment in skills, human capital, investment in resilient infrastructure, and investment in climate action at large. So these are basically the 3 areas of focus: health, education, infrastructure, including technology and digital transformation, and investments in resilience. And the infrastructure, it's the supportive infrastructure as well, take care of agriculture, biodiversity, and nature. Some of you may have heard or listened to Professor Jeff Sachs outlining the priorities of the accelerator. And as we speak, he and others working on this accelerator are in Bali discussing the implementation of this accelerator, not just under the presidency of Indonesia, but taking that further to the work going forward under the presidency of India. And the second accelerator that I came across, and it was very popular, it's the ILO-based kind of thinking on the accelerator linked to creation of jobs and social protection. And that was designed by the team from the ILO, but with great partnerships from other members of the UN family. And I'm happy that many of them, under the leadership of the Secretary General and the DSG, Amina Mohammed, are really pushing this agenda further. As always, as discussed during ANGA, and I was a moderator of that session that had a number of ministers, heads of state actually came as well from Africa to attend this meeting. It's basically about who will be at the very beginning to apply the ILO guidelines for just transitions towards the sustainable economies and societies, who will be part of this new work for social protection. And there was an interesting debate about what kind of social protection. Is it universal social protection, as the ILO advocating, or some of the new schemes like the universal basic income and others? But basically, the support is there for having decent support for jobs. And if market would let us down, we need to have decent social protection. According to the ILO, the transition to renewable energy and the circular economy could potentially generate over 100 million jobs by 2030. Great news. However, close to 80 million jobs could also be lost over the same time. So those who take people by numbers, say 100 here, 80 million, you are still winning 20. But it's not really as simple as that. Those who lose their jobs, they have their dignity, they have their families, they have their support that needed to be continued. So the idea here is basically how to keep as much of these jobs as we can, especially applying the rules of just transition, which was a subject of discussion in a meeting that was co-chaired with the President of South Africa and the President of the European Council. I moderated that one as well. So linking the two together, the work on the social accelerator, the social protection accelerator, with the work on the decent jobs, in addition to the work on just transition, I'm happy that all of these initiatives are complementary to each other. But if we take some of the elements, easy to put in these great words, what could be the requirements? The first one, create carefully designed policies to progressively achieve just transition. All right? This came out from the outcomes of the roundtable. The second one, prioritizing an integrated approach to decent job creation and universal social protection. Okay, this has something to do with that social accelerator that I just mentioned. And the third is basically allocating and aligning sufficient finance with these policy objectives to ensure success. On that one, I have to say good luck with that. Because we can always talk about finance, but then without mobilizing them from their all sources, we'll keep talking about them without finding them. And so perhaps we can do the following. Let's build on the country-based approach when it comes to designing SDGs finance. What is the very well-established mechanism? Is the Integrated National Financial Framework. And it is not just popular in the UN system, including with UNDP, I hope the same, with UNICEF and ILO. I heard them talking favorably about them. And this is a common sense approach. Anybody who opposes the Integrated National Financial Frameworks knows nothing about investment planning and know nothing about budget design. It's basically about assessments of requirements, finding gaps, and identifying the gaps and checking how to bridge the gaps by public and private sources. So countries that fail to do that are paying hefty price. So efforts are needed then from all stakeholders to do the following: ensuring that developing countries that are struggling from the impacts of today's multiple crises. In that context, I like always to quote the UN Secretary General, who's emphasizing that we have a deficit in trust. I'd like to compliment his good words by saying that we have surplus in crises. So that gets us into the kind of summary of the picture that we have. To ensure financing received is aligned with the SDGs, this is the difficult task. And on that, I'd like just to spend a couple of minutes because I interrupted the flow of this discussion. So coming from many discussions so far, 100 billion never came. If you believe Oxfam, it's 20%. If you believe the former reports coming from the joint report by Germany and Canada, it's 80%. But even if the 100 billion is coming in full, this is, I wouldn't say drop in an ocean, but drop in a pool, because the requirements are much more than that if you are considering the huge figures of transformation, including in energy, impact assessments as well on what we are doing in the resilience front is telling us it's not just energy that needs more than $1 trillion a year of external finance, but we need to have decent funds for resilience and biodiversity of no less than $450 billion. So 1.4 trillion. You can just keep counting. How can we deal with this issue? I think the report by Nextern and Vera Song is telling us something about gaps and how can we bridge these gaps of finance. But we need to know that the 100 billion is at best 10% of the annual requirements for external finance. And there is huge requirements at the domestic level for domestic resource mobilization. Of course, some of you would say, well, we have seen that report by IEA, the International Energy Agency, that says the requirements are multiples of this. And then you have the reports coming from OECD about the gaps of finance for SDGs. They were $2.5 trillion, now they are close to $4 trillion. Well, again, these gaps are not going to be bridged, but I hope we can really do something better in the next years until 2030. Do better domestic resource mobilizations. Middle income countries that are still getting tax revenue to GDP of less than 15%, they are not doing a good job. And this is actually a good number of countries doing that. The average should be no less than 25 to 30% of domestic resource mobilization. But this is not a substitute to ODA funding. This is not a substitute to private sector participation. This is not a substitute to enhancing the trade impact on growth and development. Going back to the Addis agenda. Then I have this proposal. 1 trillion will be required to be funded. Some of the OECD, not all of them, are contributing nicely. 7 countries of the OECD are doing well in that front. But some are saying that we don't really have the trust in the system in some developing economies when it comes to capacity, absorption capacity and efficiency of allocation of finance. So I have this proposal for your consideration, and that could help in the funding of the accelerators when it comes to social protection and support as well the creation of green jobs as SDG 8. As you know, this COP has been taking matters in a holistic approach, so that covers all of sustainable development goals. This COP is taking implementation seriously and say that we need to do something about finance. Finance, you need to have integrated national financial framework, but needs that to be linked to the following proposal. In 1960, something called IDA was created, International Development Association. It has good monitoring mechanism, efficiency in delivery. So you can use IDA terms to finance sustainability at large. And we can fund not just IDA of the World Bank, but all of the schemes that could support funding for sustainability. And the terms should be the following. 10 years grace period, you don't pay back anything. 20 years after the 10 years for repayment. And then the final part is basically to charge no more than 1%, no more than 1% as cost of borrowing. If you do that, that can really get some better traction because IDA has a good track record in supporting the private sector. It works in low-income countries, but the proposition here is to have a bolder IDA than what we have. And indeed, we need to extend the service of such a scheme to low-middle income countries because African countries are not low-income countries anymore. There is low-middle income countries more than the low-income countries, and the higher middle-income countries as well need support in that. So I'm seeing very worrying signs coming from the young lady there. So I'm stopping at this stage. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm just saying that we can talk forever about social protection, acceleration of the work, dreaming of green jobs, which should be with us, but without adequate finance, technical assistance, and change of leadership, we're not going to be achieving what we're after. We already 7 years after 2015 when the SDGs were launched, when Paris Agreement was agreed upon, and today we're in a much worse position than what we were back 7 years ago. If we want to continue as what we are today, we are going to be continuing the bad jobs of what we did in the past. But I hope the many lessons that we learned are pushing us to do better in the remaining 7 years before it's going to be too late by 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing on how finance is critical for what we're talking about today on green jobs. And I know we're a bit over time, so I'd invite our last speaker, Mr. Kartikeya, the Director for Center for Education of India. If you could just share, when we talk about reskilling, really, what is your center doing to ensure that young people get the required skills needed by the labor force?
Thank you. I know it's we're over time. Try to be as brief as possible. The Indian Constitution mentions it as a right, as a duty of every citizen to protect the environment. And as a result of a public interest litigation in 1993 and then in 2003, the Supreme Court of India made it compulsory for every class, every formal education program in India to have environmental education in it. Now that was quite unique, and that first generation from that event in 17 years ago is now coming into youth and into the workforce. So first time you have all these people who have been committed, at least through the education system, on the environment. As you perhaps all know, India has one of the largest youth population, and it's critical that they go into this not just as jobs, but also as commitment and as with a sense of feeling that they are part of the solution. That it's not just jobs they're looking for, which is someone else's problem, but they've been made in the school to feel that we are all part of it, and let's not get depressed. As you also know, India has this dual task of bringing up its population on development front, people who have almost no electricity use, and at the same time meeting its environmental standards. And how do you do both of them? But we did take it on that we will achieve both, and our Prime Minister has recently made the statement that by 2070 India will become a net zero in its thing. Now it's quite something to take on them. Even the bureaucrats I know in India, when the Prime Minister makes this commitment, go scuttling around because they know he means it, and they have to one way or another figure out how to do that. We are looking at just now even 2047, when we complete 100 years from our independence, we are looking at 30 million green jobs to be created. 30 million. Now we are talking about 100 million here, but maybe a large part will come from India, which is a large country. In 2015, India set up a skill council for green jobs. The Skill Council for Green Jobs, and this was done not just by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, but in partnership with the Confederation of Indian Industry. And its board has industry leaders in its board. So the point made earlier by some of the speakers that unless you have the industry and government both working together, this will not happen. They have identified jobs in renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro energy, even down to clean cooking stoves in the villages, to sustainable development, green construction, green transportation, pollution prevention, green hydrogen, to environment, forest and climate change, which is waste management, water, e-waste, carbon sinks, biofuel gases. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan just now as to how we go forward. This recent study says that we have already done something like 863,000 green jobs have been created. I think ILO was part of this study, out of which a very large part is in, of course, solar and hydro. But just like you have new green jobs, there's a major thrust on greening jobs. Our center works, for instance, with the School of Architecture and Planning, because how you plan your new cities will determine how much energy they will need, how much transport they will need, and everything else. Can we have, for instance, multiple centers so people for most of their need can walk and don't have to go? Now, if you build infrastructure which is already heavy on requirement of fuel, then of course there's only so much you can do. Now, the great advantage of India, unlike the developed countries, is that most of our infrastructure is yet to be built. What you will see in 2030 or 2050 does not exist today. So if we leapfrog if we leapfrog and do not, and learn from the West, learn from people who have developed, this is not the way to do it. How do you learn from it and do it differently from the start? The problem which most countries have is they see something, they follow it while the West is already giving it up. Then they again have to change. Here we are saying we leapfrog to something which the West does not have, but the West is going towards. So that leapfrogging as a way of critical thinking in our education system is critical. How do you not imitate? How do you go on paths which are different? So we want our young people, the youth, to think out of the box, not just imitate what images they see, and come out with solutions which perhaps don't exist anywhere in the world, but are worth a try. We also have these schemes of, which is called the 100 days of dignified jobs, which we give anyone in any village. Anyone who doesn't have work will get 100 days of job. Now, the whole idea was that they were given things, but why not use that opportunity to do green? So in the villages, for instance, why not build infrastructure, pond deepening, water conservation and other things? So that's also happening. There's a lot more to share. I know we are short of time, but I think India is trying with all its issues to take a leadership position in this and really capture, we call it the youth dividend in India because there's a huge youth population, and go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing how India is leapfrogging in education. And I'd like to give a round of applause for this panel. I know we have gone over time, but thank you for your patience as well. And I'd invite you to have your seats as I welcome Mr. Mustafa Guye, Global Coordinator Green Jobs Program at the ILO, to share some next steps.
Well, I think, Vicky, we had a great set of panels. We have heard that Iberdrola is already aiming for 1 million green jobs, and India is aiming for 30 million jobs. So what it seems is like we're already reaching our targets on the pact before even starting. But what it also means, and that's what we say in Africa, we have a very powerful youth engagement. The young work faster, but the elder knows the road. So what we have heard from Dr. Moheldin, from India, from Iberdrola, and from our senior principals, from UNEP, from VIC, and UNICEF-GenU Unlimited, and UNEP is also showing us the way. So we are together, and I think we need to keep going together. And again, as we say in Africa, if you want to go fast, young guys, girls, go along, but if you want to go far, go together. So we are here, UNEP, UNICEF-GenU Unlimited, and the ILO, ready to work together with you so that we can go far together. Thank you so much, Vicky.
Thank you so much. And that's it. Thank you so much for attending. And as Mustafa has rightly said, if we want to go far, we need to do it together with and for young people. A round of applause, and thank you for attending.